have to make sure that I really take a few moments to sit with myself and release. And that's a contemplative practice. It's just a moment of releasing the energy, the emotions. They are one and the same, emotions and energy that aren't mine. I have to realize, okay, that's this person's, and almost like hold space for myself for a moment to also let that go.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
If you're looking for help with ultrasound scanning, whether that's choosing a new machine or developing your ultrasound skills, check out the First Opinion Veterinary Ultrasound website at fovu.co.uk for independent machine reviews and online and in-person teaching options. Fovu, simplifying ultrasound.
All right, sunshines. Today we are doing a really special episode. I and Julie Squires are doing a combined episode where we're interviewing each other because Julie has her own podcast and I have my podcast, and we figured we would team up and just show you guys some interesting conversation about compassion fatigue and all the things. So let me introduce our amazing guest today. So welcome, Julie Squires. Julie is a certified compassion fatigue specialist. She's a certified life coach and a certified grief educator who brings a unique perspective and approach to support the sustained energy and passion of those who are regularly exposed to compassion fatigue in veterinary medicine. Julie is an internationally recognized speaker who we were lucky enough to have speak at the House Call and Mobile Vet Virtual Conference. She was wonderful. She has over 25 years of experience within the veterinary industry working in practice, as well as in industry itself. Her company is called Rekindle, LLC, that offers virtual and on-site seminars, workshops, online courses, private one-to-one coaching, and the Rekindling podcast, and is the result of the need Julie saw to help those that work with animals maintain their well-being and their mental health. Julie has a deep love and affection for Brené Brown, Oprah, and Keith Urban, not necessarily in that order. We obviously have a lot in common. So welcome to the show, Julie. How are you doing?
It is amazing to be here with you, Dr. Eve Harrison. Yay! Thank you for having me on. Thank you for being willing to do a dual podcast and play around with interviewing each other. It's great to be here with you.
Yay. What? Julie in the
Yeah.
house.
You too.
So we are recording in my Zoom right now. So you are, even though we're on your podcast and my podcast, you are still in the House Call Vet Cafe. So I do have to ask you to start out, what is your favorite snack to eat when you're on the road?
That's such a great question. As I was preparing for being on your show, I was thinking about how I'm not a veterinarian, as you heard, from my bio, but I was what I would call, I was a veterinary hospital house call human. What does that mean? I used to call on veterinary hospitals for 15 years in sales. I would call on veterinary hospitals. Again, that's my job, traveling around to different veterinary hospitals. And I spent a lot of time in my car, spent a lot of time on the road, is where I developed a deep love for Howard Stern. I ate a lot of meals behind that steering wheel. So now, earlier, well, actually, it was the end of last year. I bought myself a real fancy car, and I'm not eating in my car because I drink coffee in my car like it's going out of style, and that messes things up. But so I really don't have a great answer because I'm not allowing myself to eat snacks in my car right now because it got too dirty.
Well, that's a very reasonable answer. And I've been wondering, like, when it would be that I found someone who doesn't snack in the car. I was like, someday someone's going to answer that question, and the answer is going to be they don't. And here it is.
There it is. Now that doesn't mean that I haven't been known to I always have food, especially when I'm traveling. I do a lot of traveling now to do trainings and stuff like that. So it doesn't mean that I don't have a cooler packed with me and food, but it's going to mean that, yeah, I'm going to stop. And usually I'll use that time to get out of my car and stand and eat, my lunch or whatever. So I can get out of the seated position because sometimes that's a long time on the road, but doesn't mean I don't want to paint myself to be too much of a Pollyanna here.
It's interesting. Like, we're just going to take this conversation wherever it goes, I think. But it's interesting, and I need to hear your story about how you became a compassion fatigue specialist, and that what you just said about becoming a Pollyanna. I find it so interesting, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit more. There's like this really fine line between personal development, being the best we can, and the toxic positivity that is, I think, what some people consider the Pollyanna phenomenon. And you do a really good job of, like, not we have to validate people. We have to see the struggles that are real and not pretend they don't exist. And then we move from there. And so we'll get into the Pollyanna phenomenon in just a bit, but thank you for letting me know about your in-car habits and out-of-car habits and, like, stretching and, standing up and, moving around a little bit and eating outside of the car. I think that's good. So, backing up, can you tell me a little bit about how you became a compassion fatigue specialist and what took you in that direction? How did that unfold? And the life coach thing too, and grief educating. You do so many things.
Yeah. None of these were my career trajectory. When I was in college studying zoology, I just loved animals and I didn't know what I wanted to do with animals. I knew I loved animals. And that degree ended up me working in a veterinary practice. Again, none of this was planned out. I was like pie in the sky, hippie mentality, like whatever, peace, love, rainbows. We'll just see what happens. It's all good. And working in a veterinary hospital, though, literally like changed the trajectory of my life in that not only did it fill my soul, working with animals, companion animals, exotics, wildlife that we got to work with, but it also exposed me to what I didn't know at the time was compassion fatigue. There were no words for it then, but
Mhm.
I saw all around me and I'm a intuitive person. I'm a perceptive person. I'm a deeply feeling person. There's nothing about that is unique, but I saw people really struggling around me and I was struggling myself because of my sensitivities, which again, don't make me unique. I think many of us that are drawn to animals are very sensitive. And I was highly sensitive and did everything I could to not feel my sense. I tried to numb myself constantly. Developed an eating disorder, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. I did everything I could to not feel. So as I was working on myself and figuring out how to navigate the world, which is full of emotions, in this amazing field of vet med and seeing all these people that are struggling, the work's intense and emotional. My mentor and boss, I saw his struggles. And all I can say is that it's just like led me down a path I had no idea where I was going. And that was compassion fatigue. Like all of a sudden, I really deeply felt like I was being called to do this work, which I know sounds very hokey, but that's my experience.
It doesn't. I mean, it's a very organic story and very natural. It sounds like you yourself experienced a little bit of compassion fatigue. You saw it around you and it encouraged you to lean into that. And again, backing up a little bit, can you tell me what is compassion fatigue? I've seen a lot of definitions out there. I identify with having been through compassion fatigue, and I think a lot of us use the term in different ways.
Mm.
And is there one main definition? Like, the question that I have is when you're compassion fatigued, you can see that as like you care so much that you're exhausted and it hurts and you're depressed, you may be anxious. And then it's you're compassion fatigued to the point where you have nothing left to give. You don't have compassion left anymore. Are those two both aspects of compassion fatigue on a spectrum where it's like you're just so tired, you care so much constantly, and then at a certain point your compassion turns off?
Mm.
Are these two separate definitions? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and let me punt that question back to you just because I'm curious of your personal experience with before I answer that, I want to know what did you experience?
Oh, that's a good question, and thank you for asking it. I think for me, I've experienced both aspects of that, what I just described. I've had times where so I'm also a very sensitive person. I guess one of those, I guess there's a name for it, highly sensitive person things. I've always related to being sensitive and feeling deeply. And, if I see someone cry, I will be crying too. If someone is hurting, I'll be hurting too. And as a vet, or, even anyone remotely close to the veterinary space who works with people who are in grief, who sees the hurt and the fear and the, sometimes terror and whatever it is of, the thought of losing your best friend or something bad happening to your best friend or dealing with an invoice that you're being hit with you weren't prepared for. All of that is very emotional stuff. And a lot of us vets are not only is it inherently emotional, we get triggered a little bit more easily because we've been through it over and over and over again. And so some of those pain points are raw for us. Like we might feel it even more deeply than we would as someone who hadn't witnessed or experienced vicariously these traumas in some ways, right? And so for me, I would say that part of my compassion fatigue to me feels like this sort of quick to trigger. Like I've seen this situation again and again and again, and it's like, oh no, not this again. Like on some level, it's like if a client is complaining about the bill, I'm just like, oh, here we go again. So on some level, it's that I'm hypersensitive to it, quick to trigger, and my compassion goes out the window because I'm over it. And on some level, if a client is reaching out very needy on some level and, not respecting my boundaries, I have a little bit of a loss of compassion there at times because I know that they're doing what any person would and should do if they're afraid or concerned about their animal. They should reach out and they should be persistent until they get an answer. That's good guardianship of their animal. That's taking good care and that's good. And if I feel, like here we go again, someone's entitled to my time, they feel that I owe them every moment of my life, it becomes almost a loss of compassion for me. And then on the other side, there are times where I see this pain or I euthanize an animal and I can't stop crying for a week. That's also to me compassion fatigue. Like, it's not that I don't feel, it's that I feel so much that I cannot continue. Like, I can't do it anymore. And that's part of why I kind of go on euthanasia hiatuses, basically. So there are times when I can do it and times when I can't. And it's because the the pain, it's overwhelming. It's like I feel so much compassion that I cannot function. So it's both. And it's not just euthanasia. Euthanasia is like the quintessential example of where I can't go on anymore. But just seeing people hurt, seeing animals hurt and injured, or, like not receiving the care that I believe they deserve or should have, or, when a client fights me on what I know this animal needs in order to be okay. There's a combination of like unbelievable sadness and a loss of compassion for the client, So it's
Yeah.
both in
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely correct. Like, I think it's like if we were to define compassion fatigue, I can define it, but how it presents is very different. And you're doing such a wonderful job of explaining how it can present very differently from the my give a damn is busted
Yeah.
to, to I'm feeling so much that, I can't feel anymore because it's like it's overwhelming how much I'm actually feeling for the individual situation or the individual. But you hit on something really important as you were talking. What you were hitting on is the repeated. It's like compassion fatigue is about the repeated exposure to pain, struggle, suffering, distress in any way that you want to define that, right? It's like we could do an entire podcast episode on pain, struggle, suffering, and distress and all the different ways that those things show up: physical, emotional, psychological,
Mhm.
the patient, the client. And so it is that repeated over and over and over that it has such a profound effect on you as the caregiver, as the professional, right? It's like, you're right. You can't just like, and one of the things I'm so curious about is like you're as a house call veterinarian, you're going into people's spaces.
Mhm.
And I am so curious about so that to me, from what I know about being a human, is like you're immersing yourself. It's very different when people are coming to you in a veterinary hospital. It's like you're in your own space and it's pretty much it's kind of like a quote unquote sterile space. The energy is there's energy, but it's like you're walking into people's homes, which is filled with all of their emotional energy, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't surprise me in the least to hear you talk about things affecting you for days. I am curious if you recognize that, and do you have any practices in place for how you clear yourself energetically from that when you go from house to house to house, from client to client to client, or patient to patient?
Ooh, I like this question. And I think you're right. In the clinic, there are certain boundaries in place that don't exist in the home. And the kind of blending of the experience with your client and your own experience happens much more fluidly. And those pets, I tell you, they feel like your own. They do. Or for me anyway. And I think that's part of why my practice has been so successful. I feel those patients as my own, and my clients and my animal guardians know that I feel that way. And that's a blessing and a curse because they know that they're not in this alone. They know that I love their animal as much as they do, and it's as important to me as it is to them that the animal does well. And on the other hand, I take it all home with me. I feel it as if something bad happens, like disease progresses or they don't respond to a treatment or, God forbid, an adverse reaction to something. I feel that as, I don't feel it this way anymore as my sort of instinct. I think it is sort of my initial reaction is to feel it's my fault. I failed my own animal.
Mm.
And now with practice and time, I know that's obviously not healthy, and you do have to put a little bit of space and know they say 20% of your patients will get better because of you. 20% will get better despite you, and 20%, or what is it? 30%, sorry. It's a three-way pie chart, and 30% will get worse despite you. I don't know. I can't even remember.
Mhm.
We'll have to look it up. But I try to lean in a little bit to that equanimity a little bit, and my yoga training has helped me to remember equanimity. Like, I can be doing my best, the patient can have a different outcome, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with what I've done or haven't done, and so I try to really lean into that and practice that thought process, even though it's not always the first thing that comes to my mind. Like, my first instinct is I failed. Fuck.
Mhm. Mhm.
I didn't do right by my patient, and there is sort of like a little bit more work on my end to not take personally when things don't go well. And likewise, when things do go well, I have to also remind myself that, you know, I'm not good. My clients love me, and sometimes I fix the animals, and I love that, but I have to also kind of balance those 2 things. If I take credit for the good and absolutely personally say I am the best vet ever known to man, when there is a treatment failure or an animal doesn't do well or I have to euthanize my patient, I have to also know the universe has its own agenda there as well. So holding the success and the non-success or the whatever the universe has in mind for that animal, knowing that it's not all mine to hold, either the good or the bad. So I think that helps for me when I remember to lean into that way of thinking as a house call vet, because it's much more personal. All of those cases are much more personal. And, you know, not everyone feels quite that way. Not everyone is maybe as sensitive as I am, but given that I am that sensitive, I feel it as a tool for me to be able to help other people who might process things the same way, and who might find those same challenges. So, in terms of boundaries, it's like the emotional boundary is a little bit more porous. And then also the communication boundary, the communication between the client and me. So if I've been in their home, a lot of clients will think, oh, now I'm their friend and they can text me anytime for a question. And it's confusing. And many times the reality is my clients do become my friends as well.
Yeah, I can see
So
how that can happen.
so when that happens, or whether it's a friend who then becomes a client, it can go both ways. It's been, in my experience, critically important to explain to people how your service works, what is and isn't okay, and basically just the communication there. Because if you don't explain, you don't communicate, you don't have really clear policies, the default is everyone thinks you are their best friend, which in some cases you are, and that you are also available every moment to them as a result. And that's a natural thing to happen.
Yeah.
When you're in someone's space, they give you food, they make you, some of them give you presents, and it's just very sweet. It's a beautiful experience in the home. And then just for the sake of everyone's safety and clarity, to be really clear after this experience where I'm in your home, this is my professional line. You know, I don't work on the weekends. I don't work after 7 p.m. unless, you're in my concierge service, which is a whole other thing. So that's kind of that differentiation between working in the clinic and working in people's homes and how different that is. Do you have any experience with that? So you do a lot of coaching and you talk to people one on one, and I do the same, but I'm curious in your experience when you get into the nitty-gritty with people and maybe in some intimate subjects where people open up to you, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, and I guess as it relates to like having to have boundaries and having to get into the emotional piece of, yeah, like, I have coached people that have had horrific traumas that have related to animals. I have, coached people through death of loved ones and I have to be really good about understanding kind of what you talked about is separating myself as, I have the ability to know when I'm like professional Julie versus Julie in my life. And I feel like I have there's space in between those identities of me. That doesn't mean like there are times though that I have to sit in this office and I have like, I have my smudge spray over here. I've got my aromatherapy oils over there. I have a yoga cushion back here. I've got a meditation cushion. Like there are times where I have to sit in this, like I have to be careful because right out that door is, my husband. And I have all of a sudden gone from a really intense session and then gone out and tried to segue into my normal life. And I can't do that. I have to make sure that I really take a few moments to sit with myself and release. And that's a contemplative practice. It's just a moment of releasing the energy, the emotions. They're one and the same emotions and energy that aren't mine. I have to realize, okay, that's this person's, and almost like hold space for myself for a moment to also let that go. And that is like, it takes a moment. And I get it. We're so busy. We want to rush on to the next thing. I find myself doing that too. But we do need to, and I don't care if you're work like You could be working in a veterinary practice. Like before you go into the next exam room, it's sort of the same thing, right? It's like while I'm washing my hands, let's say, like, so if I was a veterinarian, while I'm washing my hands, can I just connect myself to washing away a little bit of what I maybe picked up, took on, right? And all the different ways we could do that. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I like how you connect the physicality with the emotionality, that there's this almost representation. You're washing your hands and incorporating a practice, a ritual, and a thought process and an energy to that. So that is really cool. I think I didn't quite answer your question before about, like what I might do to kind of clear that space. And for me, there are a few things. Like sometimes I'll sit in my car before or after an appointment and before my next patient. And if it's been really intense for one, or I know it's going to be really intense for the next one, I will sit in my car and I do a little bit of yoga stuff and full body scan, reconnect my psyche with my body. Because when we get really emotional or in our heads or sad, distracted, whatever kind of emotional intensity, we can really split from our awareness of ourselves as a physical person. And to me, I get very heady. I get very cerebral in my head, and I'm like, "Oh, I have a body. Look at that." Who knew?
Right.
Just a floating head in my car driving somehow
Yeah.
with my brain. And to me, sometimes I'll do a body scan and really perceive my physicality. And it brings me back into the moment. I connect with my breath. And the breath is such a powerful tool to connect your mind back to your body and to just remember the moment that you're in. I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm in my body. I'm me. And I know what to do. Everything's going to be okay. So it sort of has that sort of like whoosh, like bringing the climate down of emotional intensity to just be. One of my yoga teachers would say, let's bring it back to body speed.
Mhm.
Let's bring your experience back to body speed, which is slow. And, I incorporated that into my yoga classes that I taught. I always talk about bringing people back to body speed. And I also talk about doing things at, dog and cat time, on dog and cat time, because they perceive their time, I imagine, has got to be so much different. And they live in the moment. And let's also get back into that living in the moment and let time slow down to the physicality, because animals live in the physicality so much more than we do. And
Yes.
so I try and kind of revisit that. And I also have in my car one of my best friends, Catskill, who is also a licensed marriage and family therapist and a retired veterinary technician who was a part of Marigold Veterinary for a long time. He's also a artist, and he made these glass mala beads that are just like gorgeous, and I keep them in my car. And if I'm like really feeling wound up for some reason, I'll take those mala beads and I'll breathe slowly for each mala bead, and I'll count, and I'll do that. And so that is one of my little, secrets. I haven't actually told anyone about that before. So and these things are beautiful. It's called a unicorn mala. It's like got lavender and pink and sparkles. It's like I
Mm.
can't believe such an incredible thing exists. So
Ugh,
yeah, that's one of my secret tools. And I
sounds
love
gorgeous. Yeah. And,
is.
what's so important here is that it's like the challenge is to keep like I get it. You have another client that's waiting for you, and your brain will want to tell you you don't have time
Yes.
to spend 30 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes doing all of this. Your brain, like, no, we have to check the email, we have to check the text, we have to get to the next place. We don't know what the traffic is. Like, your brain will try to interject all the time. So to me, it's like the practice of our life is about not buying into the lies that our brain is always trying to tell us. Because you're right, it's like we do ourselves such a disservice by not just taking a moment for ourselves to come, what I call come back home to ourselves. It's like we get pulled out of ourselves all day long. We have to come back home, then get pulled out again, then come back home, get pulled out so we can serve, come back home. It's like, it's that constant and yeah, our brain will it's the internal struggle. I mean,
Yeah.
every single day it's an internal struggle for me to meditate. I meditate for 5 minutes, Eve. 5. every morning. And I feel like I deserve an award for that, to be quite honest. I'm
Yeah,
like,
you
every
do.
day, I'm like, Look at me. I am nailing it." Every morning, my brain's like, "We don't have time. No, we have other things to do. We
Right,
need to."
right.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I love that you mentioned this kind of coming back, return and return and return and keep bringing it back in because, I mean, do you use that term, the monkey brain? Like, are you familiar with it?
Mhm.
Like the
Mhm.
the human brain, it just wants to find the anxiety, it wants to find the danger, and it keeps going to that, and our brains just go nuts. And no matter how much of a yogi you are, no matter how well trained you are in compassion fatigue, it's the nature of the human brain to kind of repeatedly try and stray from that centered equanimity and okayness and being in the body. And it's for all of us, it's just a practice. It's an ongoing practice. Come back again. Oh, there's my brain doing that thing that's come back again. And it's just so important. I think in the yoga world, people will say all the time, I'm not very good at yoga or I'm not very good at meditation. And to me, it's like, oh, we have a misunderstanding. There is no good at. It's the thing is we're all always getting off, quote unquote, off track. And the practice is to keep returning, return
Yeah.
again and again and again. And that's what it is to meditate or have
Yeah.
a personal practice and to come back to our compassion.
Yeah.
And, that's the nature. That's exactly the nature of it, right?
Right. It's like, it's the most hilarious thing. Like, I'm always asking, live audiences or whatever, like, "Hey, anyone meditate?" And like, when I ask people why they don't meditate, it's like, "Oh, because I can't quiet my mind." I'm like, "Well, you, me, and everybody." It's like none of us can quiet our mind. Like, that's
Right.
not the goal. Like, where did we get this idea that meditation is we're going to still our mind? You're right. It's a thought producing machine. There
Mhm.
is no quieting it.
No.
There's the noticing it, there's the putting our attention onto something else, be it the breath, be it a mantra, be it whatever, and then it goes away, and then we recognize it and we bring it back. That is the practice.
That is
And the same thing with there's a metaphor in our life. Oh, we get pulled out and we get into the emotions of what's going on in that family because we were just in their house and with that patient and what was going on, what the client told us. And then we have to come back to ourselves, who we are. And then the next house call, oh, what happened again? And then the text message does it. It's like, it's just that returning, like you said, the return, the return, the return. Yeah. Why doesn't anybody teach us this, for crying out loud? I did yoga teacher training too. I probably learned it there, but not everyone does that.
Why am I not surprised? Of course you're a yoga teacher too. How did I not know this? Oh my God. Okay, guys, so Julie and I had so much to say that we're doing another two-part episode. So tune in to our next episode next week to catch the rest of our amazing conversation.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as The House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for house call vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.